Bowl season is terrible, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a Scrooge that hates watching college football around Christmas time. I actually love it, and that's just the problem. No one else seems to. Here we can see all the non-New Year's Six bowl games that have existed since 2004, and over the last few years there's been a pretty consistent decline in attendance. Bowl season used to be something special, an opportunity for diehard fans to travel to an exciting atmosphere to cheer on their team, a chance for players to have one last ride with their teammates, and an annual celebration of college football as a whole for fans across the nation. But now it's evolved into a bundle of glorified scrimmages between teams playing in front of an apathetic crowd. There's a whole messy storm of factors feeding off each other to cause this downward spiral, so let's try and unpack the biggest ones. The first and most notable is the introduction of the college football playoff, which was great for expanding the range of teams to make a run at becoming national champions, but it's been detrimental to the schools that miss out. Alright, let's pull the graph back up. Now, as you can see, from 2004 to 2013, things were relatively consistent, but once the playoff was introduced, boom, straight down. All the hype that we added to the playoff in the New Year's Six Bowls clearly contributed to the lack of hype of all the other bowl games. That gets compounded when we look at the sheer number of bowl games we have now. There were 45 total postseason games played in December and January if we include the playoff. That means well over half the FBS qualified, so as long as if you weren't absolute dog water, your team got to go to a bowl game. It wasn't always like this. In the early days, it was super rare to get selected for a bowl game, hovering around 10 to 20%. Once cable TV was introduced and it was possible to broadcast more games, we saw bowl season expand to 30% through the 80s and 90s. I think that this was kind of the golden age of bowl season, where it was an achievable honor to be selected to a bowl game, and it resulted in some of the most electric matchups at the best venues in the nation. But as more money poured into college football and ESPN took control of organizing bowl season, we saw an explosion of games added as the BCS era began, and it hasn't really slowed down since then. This oversaturation of bowl games has resulted in games being played in venues that aren't exactly tourist destinations, like Albuquerque, New Mexico, Montgomery, Alabama, and Detroit, Michigan. Bowl season has also gained the notoriety of having some of the strangest sponsors for these games too, like Bad Boy Mowers, Lockheed Martin, and even Rob Gronkowski. That's not even a company, that's just a man. If this trend continues, we're gonna end up having the Mr. Beast Fiesta Bowl in Greenville, North Carolina by the year 2030. Jimmy, if you actually do that, you owe me like $1 million for that idea. You know that that's a good name. Another thing to add on is the fact that almost all of these bowl games have complicated contracts with conferences to decide which teams get to play where, which often results in uninspiring matchups. So when you combine the lack of novelty of bowl games with the turbulent transfer portal and a short timeline until the NFL draft, there's a lot of reasons for star players to sit these games out to avoid injuries and keep their options open for other schools. Then without the best players on the field, you get a lower quality game to watch, and less fans will show up, and that cycle continues on into the next season. Luckily, I'm here with a master plan to fix all these issues, so let's jump right in. Step 1 is to go ahead and get rid of a bunch of these bowl games. I basically picked all the newer ones that either share the same city with already well-established bowls, are in a not-so-great location to visit, or have a below-average stadium. Let's take a moment of silence to remember these bowl games that we lost here today. Okay, moving on. We also need to get rid of conference ties. So that's why I picked these 6 bowls to be completely at large and feature all the teams that are ranked number 13 through 24 by the playoff committee. This would basically be the new New Year's Six, where teams that just missed the tournament are still promised a great matchup at a high-profile bowl game. Now, I know I literally just said that we need to get rid of conference ties, but that was kind of a lie, honestly, because if we kept everything at large, then the smaller schools are just going to get tossed to the wayside. So that's why every conference should be allocated a handful of bowl games that fit their geographic location. 2 games for the conferences with 12 or less teams, and 3 for the conferences with more than 12 teams. The last tier would consist of 2 more bowl games for the last 4 in, to account for any independent schools and any teams that played well but were in a conference that already used up all their automatic bowl bids. The first bowl I picked was the Hawaii Bowl because that's just a fun location, even if their stadium is tiny now. For the other one, none of the existing bowls really stuck out to me, so I decided that we need to make a new one. Now, where would fans be willing to travel to during the holidays, not only to watch the game, but to experience the city while they're there? Everywhere warm is pretty much filled out, the Pacific Northwest is too wet, the Midwest and Northeast are way too cold and depressing. But what about Denver, Colorado? I mean, it's literally a winter wonderland. So that's why I came up with the Mountain Bowl in Dick's Sporting Goods Park. The last touch that I think would really polish the image of bowl season is to rebrand a lot of these bowl games because, let's be honest, a lot of these names are boring. The Texas Bowl is now the Astro Bowl, the LA Bowl is now the Hollywood Bowl, the ReliaQuest Bowl is now the Guava Bowl, the Rate Bowl is going back to the Copper Bowl, and the 68 Ventures Bowl is now the Azalea Bowl. Basically, unless you have a silly mascot, your company shouldn't be allowed to have naming rights to a bowl game. That being said, if the Outback Bowl comes back, I would be totally behind it, but we need to make sure that these guys come back too. So if we were to follow my bowl game structure, this is what bowl season would have looked like this year. See? Lots of fun matchups that are actually worth watching. The Pop-Tart Bowl would of course still be peak entertainment, but I think even matchups like Syracuse and Army in the Citrus Bowl and Baylor and Texas A&M in the Astro Bowl would create a lot more hype than we've seen in recent memory, especially considering how much more of a privilege it would be to qualify for a bowl game in this model. Boston College, USC, and Arkansas were technically the worst teams that made a bowl game, and they all had 7 wins with pretty strong resumes, so it wouldn't just be a gimme for a team to play in the postseason like we have today. Now, would this idea solve all the problems that we have with bowl season today? No, of course not. I think that we would still see a lot of players opting out of bowl games and teams still getting upset that they got dealt a worse hand than they were expecting, but I do think it would be a step in the right direction that would make people care more about bowl season. The powers that be, whether it's the NCAA or ESPN events, need to really look at the current state of these games and think, is this honoring to the sport? Or are we just trying to squeeze every last ounce of profit from advertisers, even if it means delivering a worse product to both fans and players? I'd love to hear some of y'all's thoughts on bowl season too, so let me know in the comments what changes you'd want to see. I want to thank you all for making it to the end of this video and subscribing if you want to see more of my wacky ideas in the future. So I'll see y'all in the next one. Stay safe out there.